Donald J. Trump wanted a different role for America.
We will stop racing to topple foreign regimes that we know nothing about. Instead, our focus must be on defeating terrorism.
As U.S. president, he pledged to put
America first
and U-turn U.S. foreign policy, from ripping up trade agreements to rethinking the Iran deal and questioning commitment to NATO. Many expected President Trump was going to rein in U.S. engagement abroad. But in the Middle East, where he pledged to focus on destroying Daesh, President Trump has made surprising moves. After 6 years of war in Syria, these images of a reported chemical attack by the Syrian regime prompted a military reaction from Washington: the destruction of an airbase by 59 Tomahawk missiles. The U.S. also used its most potent 10-ton non-nuclear bomb for the first time against Daesh targets in Afghanistan. In Yemen, Trump authorized a U.S. Special Forces raid in his first Middle East engagement as president. On the Israeli-Palestinian issue, Trump's administration has openly taken sides.
The days of Israel bashing are over.
So too, it seems, is a policy of condemnation against North Korea's continuing nuclear missile tests.
The policy of strategic patience has ended. We're exploring a new range of diplomatic, security, and economic measures. All options are on the table.
100 days into his presidency, Trump's foreign policy appears to be taking some shape, but remains unpredictable.
Our military strength will be questioned by no one, but neither will our dedication to peace.
In an increasingly volatile international arena, he still shoulders the question that has confronted other U.S. presidents: to act or not to act. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from Washington, D.C. by Atiba Madjun. He's the founder of Party Politics US, a firm that analyzes American demographics. And from Fort Lauderdale in Florida, we have radio show host John Cardillo. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Atiba, how has President Trump done after 100 days?
Well, let's just first say the president did a great job first getting elected. I think he ran a brilliant campaign, which a lot of people who are in this resist movement here may disagree with. But since he's become president over this first 100 days, he has not done a good job of being credible. He said a lot of things that a lot of people feel a lot of mistrust about, as well as he's not done what I'd like to see him do in those first 100 days, or any president, and bring the country together. It seems as if right now the country is more divided than it's ever been, and there are a lot of accusations that the former president had divided the country along the lines of race. But I think that right now we have issues with immigration, we have race, we have religion, we have travel bans, we have just so many different things that are coming at us that the country is divided, and he has not done a good job in this first 100 days doing so, and it's indicative of what his polling numbers are telling us.
John Cardillo, not credible and divisive. What do you think?
No, I absolutely disagree. Look, I don't like the concept of the first 100 days anyway. Understand the history of the United States. From the time of our revolution, our secession from England, to the ratification of our Constitution was 15 years. And then we placed this ridiculous bar on modern-day presidents of 100 days. But that being said, Barack Obama divided this nation to what might be an irreparable place. He was a terrible, terrible divider. Donald Trump can't be expected to repair 8 years of that disaster in a mere 100 days. But he's done some outstanding things. Look, North Korea has been a global threat to countries all over the world, including Turkey. It's a lot closer to Turkey than it is to the U.S., and it can destabilize the region, and that can creep into Europe very quickly. Donald Trump is the first president in modern history to get China to side with us to refuse North Korean coal shipments in favor of U.S. goods to put pressure on North Korea. He's got Russia at the table talking about Assad in Syria. He single-handedly saved the coal and energy exploration industry in the United States. He's done an outstanding job. And as for the polls, these are the same polls that were predicting a 92% chance of a Hillary Clinton win on election night, had Hillary Clinton up 12%, 7%. So forgive me if I pay these polls no mind and give them, the polls, no credibility.
Okay, but they're not necessarily the same polls, and they do give us a bit of an indication. You've mentioned a bunch of things, particularly a lot of foreign policy as well, John, and we're going to separate these out as we go along and broaden it out as we go along. But let's talk a little bit about those approval ratings at 100 days historically. Let's call up this little graphic, which our viewers will see, which will show you Trump compared to other presidents historically after 100 days. Trump at 42%, Barack Obama, his predecessor, at 65%, George W. Bush at 53%, Bill Clinton at 45%. I know you don't want to take this seriously, John, but why is he doing such a lousy job in terms of the approval ratings after 100 days, particularly when you compare him to the other presidents?
Well, that graphic in abstract means very little. You have to dig into the crosstabs of those polls, which I do daily on my show and in the analyses I write. And when you look at those polls, the pollsters tend to move left. So many of those polls they oversample Democrats. They oversample non-Trump voters, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama supporters, by 7 to 9%. So those results don't surprise me, but they're not representative of the electorate. They're simply not representative of the true sentiment in America. There's overwhelming support for the president.
Atiba, it's not representative of the true sentiment in America. What do you think?
Look, we've been all around the country, and in Florida, where John is, I've talked to people on the ground who voted for President Trump. Many of them are telling us that they regret the decision, and they regretted that decision just days after the election. The reality of this is that we live in a country where we have an electoral process to elect the President of the United States that gives us, I won't say skewed numbers, but it doesn't give us the real dynamic of what it is that the electorate is doing, because the states essentially end up voting for the president using the Electoral College. But here are the numbers. 62 million people voted for Donald Trump. 65 million people voted for Hillary Clinton. Unfortunately, 71 million people stayed on the sideline, and 7 million people also voted for Jill Stein and Gary Johnson, who were the other two candidates in the race. Regardless of whether or not you want to say that Obama was a divider or a not, I'd like to believe that he was at least very comforting in terms of, as president, his tone, what he said, what it was that he tried to work toward. The issues that we have right now is we really do have a divided country, and the country became more divided because of the fact that we did have a man who happened to be black, who was president of the United States, who at least, in my opinion, did appear to be president of the United States, not just of our country, but he was a good representative for us around the world. Here we are 100 days into President Trump's, 102 days into President Trump's presidency, and he still hasn't traveled across the pond or gone to another country. We need, I mean, in terms of when we talk about uniting, the rest of the world, other citizens in other countries are also not very happy with what we have here as president. I think the president, and I do want the president to do, I want him to do exceptionally well. His success is indicative of like our success. It's a good representation for the rest of the world. So many people depend on our country to do well.
Right.
But if our country is split and divided, that is what's going to happen to the rest of the world.
Okay. John Cardillo, are you convinced that he has drained the swamp? He promised to drain the swamp. He's appointed his daughter, his son-in-law. Flynn had ties to Russia and so on. He didn't drain the swamp, did he?
Well, first of all, those are two different issues. I've seen zero evidence that General Flynn did anything wrong, but we'll reserve that for another discussion. Zero evidence is anecdotal, anonymous sources. Look, I'm not a fan of the president's family being in the West Wing so close to the president. I'm not a fan of that. And I've been very public about not defending that. But to a couple of Ativa's other points, Donald Trump is president of the United States of America. He's not president of the rest of the world. So I don't care that in his first 3 months he hasn't traveled abroad. And frankly, Barack Obama weakened us around the world. Barack Obama created the vacuum that saw the rise of ISIS. Barack Obama created the vacuum in Libya. His foreign policy was absolutely abysmal. And Barack Obama's foreign policy led to things like Brexit. It led to things like the rise of Marine Le Pen in France. So to say Barack Obama did a good job on the international stage is kind of laughable. It was very, very weak. Now, there are things that I've been critical of with the Trump administration. The fact that Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner do seem to be in a policy role that they might be a bit in over their heads. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not so partisan that I won't admit that. But overwhelmingly, I think the president has gone to work, and he has a tremendous disaster to repair that Barack Obama caused. He can't really be traveling around the world doing apology tours like Barack Obama did. He said he was putting America first. That's exactly what he's doing.
Okay. And the Trump administration put out an ad to mark 100 days. This is what people saw on their TVs and came across on their social media feeds in the past few days. Have a look.
Donald Trump, sworn in as president 100 days ago. America has rarely seen such success. A respected Supreme Court justice confirmed. Companies investing in American jobs again. America becoming more energy independent. Regulations that kill American jobs eliminated. The biggest tax cut plan in history. You wouldn't know it from watching the news. America is winning, and President Trump is making America great again.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Let's bring in Ahmed Majidyar now. He's the director of the Iran Observed Project at the Middle East Institute. Ahmed, before I get into some of the foreign policy conundrums and the debates as we go along, when you heard that ad from the Trump administration, did any of it sound credible to you?
Well, I think that on domestic issues, the Supreme Court justice has been one of President Trump's achievements. But other than that, I don't see any notable achievements so far. He definitely had problem with the healthcare, which was his biggest, topped his agenda. But on the other hand, when it comes to foreign policy issues, he has had more bipartisan support from the Congress than on his domestic agenda.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, because on healthcare, he seemed to have been stymied by Congress. On the Muslim ban or immigration, the Supreme Court was in his way. Checks and balances of democracy, I guess, Atiba. But on foreign policy, can you say he's been predictable at all, Atiba? Do we actually know what his policy is?
Nothing about this president is predictable, and I'm not going to say that that's a bad thing. I mean, when you're playing in this arena, you don't want to always show your hand. I also think, though, in terms of the relationship building, that there's a big divide, and I think a big question right now is that's coming from a lot of our foreign leaders is how do they approach the president, how do they treat him, how do they talk with him, and I think that we'll see more and we'll understand more over the next 100 days moving forward by their actions and how this all plays out.
Ahmed, do you still think he's going to rip up the Iran deal?
I don't think so. Of course, during the campaign season, he described the Iran deal as one of the worst deals ever and promised to tear it up once he's in office. But so far, we have seen that he's not walked away from the Iran deal. He has asked his administration to conduct an interagency review of the deal. But my belief is that he will stick to the deal, but on the other hand, will increase pressure in cooperation with regional allies to push back against Iran's influence in the region, and also on Iran's non-nuclear activities such as the ballistic missile program. But canceling the deal is easier said than done. That's because the nuclear agreement is not a bipartisan deal between the United States and Iran. There are 5 other parties to the deal, and also much of the agreement is also enshrined in the UN Security Council Resolution 2231. So he has understood that walking away from deal is not easy, but definitely he has taken a tougher line on Iran.
John, would that be an admission, perhaps, that there's some value to President Obama's deal with the Iranians?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more a byproduct of what the gentleman just said. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to the deal, but I do believe sanctions are going to be ramped up on Iran. And look, they know that they can't trifle with Trump. They knew that they could push Obama around. Barack Obama was very malleable. Donald Trump isn't. North Korea is seeing that now, and Russia saw that in Syria. And so I think that Iran will be a lot more compliant. Look, I wish he would tear the deal up and throw it away. I think it was a ridiculous deal, and the UN never puts teeth on any resolution. They let the bad guys get away with whatever they're going to get away with. So all things being equal, I wish he would. I understand the moving parts, and I understand the complexity of just exiting the deal. But I do believe he's going to put some teeth behind that deal and force compliance. And if they don't comply, I do believe he and Secretary Tillerson, our Secretary of State, will tear the thing up and exit the deal.
Atiba, might there be some buyer's remorse from those who might have voted for him because it was America first and it was staying out of everybody else's business? And then he dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan. He's locking horns with the North Koreans. He bombed the Assad regime in Syria and so on. I haven't followed the polls. You have. are many thinking, hold on, what happened to America first? What happened to staying out of everybody else's business?
You know, someone said earlier about the 100 days, I think John did. You know, this first 100 days, it goes really fast. You know, and in terms of buyer's remorse, we still have a long way to go before this president's first term is up. So if we have buyer's remorse, we need to get, you know, put on our boots and get to work, because what is also happening, I mean, the president, he tried to get this border wall piece funded. They did not put that in the 6-month agreement that Congress just came up with. The questions here is not just about buyer's remorse. What I think and what I give credit to this president for is that he's made the citizens of this country more engaged in this process. There are more Americans and more people now that when we're going around the country that are engaged in our understanding what the issues are. Yesterday, the Washington Post printed a story about the president, and it said that the president did not know that their job of being president was this difficult. I think that when people are critical of any one of the presidents, I mean, I love there was a comedian that talked about impersonated George W. Bush. Do you miss me now? There are a lot of people that have criticized our past presidents without recognizing the weight of the job. And so I think that what we're also seeing now is that President Trump is...
Yeah, is that more people being engaged, or rather just that mainly liberal media for 8 years didn't question Barack Obama, and suddenly they realize their job is to question the president? Might that be a part of it as well, Atiba?
Whether it was liberal media or not, conservative media was definitely critical of the president, and you know, I think one of the things that was my big argument with people in general, citizens were not critical of the president. Yes, he made some huge mistakes in the Middle East. That's why we're in the situation we are right now in Syria, but you know, whether or not you like or don't like the Iran deal, or for instance, I mean, right here within our hemisphere, whether or not you like or don't like the decision that he made on Cuba, I think that the president tried to make some steps to put us in a better situation. It is up for us, the citizens of this country, as well as the citizens of the world, to hold our elected officials accountable to make sure that they make the right decisions and don't put us in harm's way. Right. My concern is that what this president is doing with his rhetoric and with us not understanding what he may do is putting us in a dangerous position.
Okay, John Cardillo, are you salivating at the prospect of liberals rolling up their sleeves and arguing with you and being more engaged because Trump is president and they don't like it?
Well, look, it's great for all of us on air when they do that. I will say, I agree 95% with everything Atiba just said. I think it was a really spot-on analysis. It was a great analysis, actually, except for the last part. I don't think Donald Trump puts us at risk in any way, shape, or form. But look, I will say this. We have a Congress here, and the establishment Republicans in Congress are probably more aligned with Democrats on many things than with the president. And I will also agree with Atiba. The base social media has made the average American voter much more engaged and much more intelligent and knowledgeable about the inside baseball, if you will, of politics, the little nuances that go on between senators and congresspeople, how they cut their deals. And I think those things, when they see how big of a swamp it is and how they're really removed from that process, they're powerless, it's why they gravitate to a Donald Trump. And of course, look, the liberal media is always going to do what they do. But last point, and where I wholeheartedly agree with Atiba's analysis, is we need to question our leaders. I'm an ardent Trump supporter. I've been. And earlier in the show, I said, hey, look, I'm not comfortable with the way his daughter and son-in-law are setting some policy. Well, man, I get attacked by Trump supporters for saying that. But if we don't, as Americans, question our president, critique things our president, our elected officials do, we're dropping the ball. We're not doing our constitutional duty as Americans, as constituents.
Ahmed, if you were a foreign ambassador or were in foreign intelligence and you were trying to detect some sort of pattern to this president's approach to foreign policy and his policy in general, would you be able to define him after 100 days?
No, I wouldn't. I think that it's too soon to define the Trump administration foreign policy doctrine, or even his policy towards specific foreign policy challenges, whether it's Iran, Syria, North Korea, Russia, China, or more. I think that it has been very unpredictable. And at the same time, we see contradictions from different team members of the Trump administration. whether it's the administration's ambassador to the UN or Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, about Iran, about Syria, for example, about the future of Assad's role, and so on. So there is an unpredictability. I think that the component of unpredictability in foreign policy sometimes can be helpful, especially in negotiations. But because the United States is just the leader of the world, I don't think that it has to be unpredictable. It has to be very clear in outlining its values, its policies, and send a very clear message to both friends and enemies across the world, so that the allies can just rely on the United States, and also the enemies know that what the U.S. policies should be.
Well, so far it appears the president doesn't want to be predictable. He's certainly shaken up the political culture and the way people engage with it. I've really enjoyed this discussion, gentlemen, but unfortunately I've got to wrap. John Cardillo, Atiba Madjun, and Ahmed Majidyar, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot.